We all know the story, right? A dark, lonely road. The sound of hoofbeats thundering through a quiet autumn night. A terrified schoolmaster named Ichabod Crane, running for his life from a horseman carrying his own severed head. This is the Headless Horseman, the terrifying ghost of Sleepy Hollow, and probably the most famous ghost in all of American folklore. For 200 years, this story has been a Halloween classic. We've all just kind of accepted that it's fiction, a great horror story from the mind of Washington Irving. The horseman is a myth, a legend. But what if the most famous ghost story in American history isn't really a ghost story at all? What if the legend we all know is wrapped around a core of a brutal, forgotten truth? What if the Headless Horseman was a real person? And what if that person was a German soldier who literally lost his head in a gruesome Revolutionary War battle? We're going to dig into historical records, ancient folklore, and the very battlefield that gave birth to America's most infamous ghost. Because the truth behind the legend is way more fascinating and far more real than you think. Before we get to the blood-soaked battlefields of the American Revolution, we have to understand that Washington Irving didn't just invent the idea of a headless rider. He was a master storyteller, and he tapped into a primal fear that's been haunting people for centuries. A fear that crossed the Atlantic with the very Europeans who would later fight for their independence. The Headless Horseman is an ancient nightmare, and he shows up in folklore all over the world. The most chilling ancestor of the Sleepy Hollow phantom comes from Ireland. There he's known as the Dullahan, which means the dark man. The Dullahan isn't just a ghost. He's a demonic fairy, a messenger of death itself. He rides a headless black horse and carries his own rotting head under his arm. His eyes are small and black, darting around like flies, and a hideous grin splits his face from ear to ear. By holding his head up high, he can see for miles, peering into the homes of the dying. The Dullahan has one terrifying purpose: to claim the souls of those about to die. He carries a whip made from a human spine, and when he stops riding, someone dies. Some stories say he calls out the person's name, and they instantly drop dead. The only thing that can supposedly defend against him is gold. Even the smallest piece of it will scare him away. But Ireland isn't the only place with these kinds of stories. Scottish folklore tells of Euan of the Little Head, a clan heir who was decapitated in a battle on the Isle of Mull. Denied his rightful place as chieftain, his ghost is said to ride endlessly through the valley where he died. Similar tales of headless riders pop up in Welsh, Dutch, and Scandinavian folklore, often tied to times of war or great tragedy. The theme was especially big in German folk tales, which Washington Irving knew well from his travels. The Brothers Grimm even included a few stories of headless horsemen, who were often depicted as guardians of lost treasure or omens of danger. So when Washington Irving sat down to write his story, the idea of a headless horseman was already a terrifying and well-established figure. He had the blueprint for a monster. What he needed was a uniquely American story to give it a body, a specific time and place that could ground this ancient terror in the soil of the New World. And he found it in the whispered tales of his home in the Hudson Valley, stories that spoke of the recent brutal history of the American Revolution. To find the real-world inspiration for the Headless Horseman, we have to step out of folklore and into the mud and blood of American history. The year is 1776. The American Revolution is just getting started, and it's not going well for George Washington's army. After a huge defeat at the Battle of Long Island, his army is in full retreat. To make matters worse, the British had hired mercenaries, the feared and formidable German soldiers known as Hessians. About 30,000 of these soldiers were contracted to fight for King George. To the American colonists, they were terrifying. Known for their discipline and brutality, they were painted in propaganda as bloodthirsty killers who fought only for money. They were the boogeymen of the Revolution. In late October 1776, Washington's army made a stand near the small town of White Plains, New York, just a few miles from a quiet little valley called Sleepy Hollow. On October 28th, the Battle of White Plains began. It was a brutal, hard-fought battle, and the Hessians led the charge, pushing the American lines back with relentless force. This is where documented history and local legend begin to collide. While there is no single document that says, "This is the origin of the ghost," a very real and gruesome event took place that provides a tantalizing source. Major General William Heath of the American Army wrote about it in his memoirs. He recorded that on November 1st, 1776, right around Halloween, an American artillery unit on a hill fired on an advancing group of Hessian soldiers. According to General Heath's own words, a shot from the American cannon at this place took off the head of a Hessian artilleryman. One cannonball, fired in what Irving would later call a nameless battle, may very well have created the seed of the Headless Horseman legend. Imagine the scene. In the chaos of battle, a soldier is instantly decapitated. His comrades, still under fire, would have had little time for a proper burial. Local legend from the Hudson Valley insists that the body of this unlucky soldier was carried away and buried in the old burial ground of the old Dutch church of Sleepy Hollow, a place already known for its ghost stories. His head, however, was supposedly left behind on the battlefield. While there's no historical record confirming a headless Hessian was buried in the churchyard, it's easy to see how the story of a decapitated German soldier could have quickly become a potent local legend. It was a ghost story with a fresh, tangible source, whispered around fireplaces in Tarrytown and Sleepy Hollow. The ghost wasn't just any spirit. He was a Hessian, one of the feared invaders. This made him the perfect local villain, a symbol of the war that had just torn their communities apart. We don't know his name, only that he was a German soldier who met a horrific end near Sleepy Hollow. This mix of real history and local folklore is what makes the story so powerful. It's a reminder that sometimes the most enduring legends have roots in real, human events. If you're fascinated by the hidden histories behind famous myths, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because we have a lot more investigations like this one coming up. Let me know in the comments if you've heard other local legends that might have a real story behind them. So we have the ancient folklore of a headless rider, and we have the powerful local legend of a real decapitated soldier. How did these two streams merge to create the story we know today? The answer lies with one man, Washington Irving. Irving wasn't just a writer. He was a son of the Hudson Valley. Born in 1783, right as the war was ending, he grew up surrounded by the living memories of the conflict. He spent a lot of time in Tarrytown, and it's highly likely he heard the local ghost story of the headless Hessian soldier said to be buried in the old Dutch churchyard. This local rumor, born from the recent war, gave him the perfect American foundation for his tale. Later, Irving spent 17 years in Europe, where he soaked up the folklore of the Old World. He became friends with Sir Walter Scott, and definitely would have come across the tales of the Irish Dullahan and the German headless hunters. He saw the universal horror of a decapitated rider, a figure stuck between the world of the living and the dead. In 1820 he published The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and what he did was brilliant. He took the ancient European monster and dropped it into the American landscape he knew so well. He gave the phantom a specific historical origin story. The ghost of a Hessian trooper whose head had been carried away by a cannonball in some nameless battle during the Revolutionary War. This wasn't a random detail. By making the Horseman a Hessian, Irving tapped into the post-war anxieties and the reputation these soldiers already had. Then, he set the story in a real place. Sleepy Hollow is a real village you can visit today. The old Dutch church, where the horseman is supposedly buried, is a real church that still stands. The cemetery contains the graves of many families whose names Irving used, like the Van Tassels. He even based his characters on real people. The love interest, Katrina Van Tassel, was likely based on a real resident named Katrina Ecker Van Tessel. And the villain, Brom Bones, is thought to have been inspired by a local Tarrytown blacksmith, Abraham Martling, who was known for his incredible strength and for riding a huge black horse. Irving masterfully wove together ancient folklore, American history, and the real people and places of the Hudson Valley. He created a story that felt both mythic and true. The genius of it all is that Irving leaves the ending ambiguous. Was it really the Hessian's ghost? Or was it just Brom Bones in disguise, using the local legend to scare off his rival? All we know is that Ichabod disappears, leaving behind only his hat and a smashed pumpkin. This ambiguity allows the historical legend and the supernatural myth to coexist, which is exactly why the story is still so popular over 200 years later. The Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow is more than just a ghost. He's a composite creature, a testament to the power of a good story. His spirit comes from the misty bogs of Ireland and the dark forests of Germany. His body, within the legend, is that of an unnamed Hessian soldier who tragically lost his life on a New York battlefield. And his fame was cemented by a brilliant American author who knew how to blend myth and history into something timeless. Washington Irving gave America its first great ghost story, but he did it by understanding that the best legends aren't just made up. They are born from real events, real people, and real fears. The story of the Headless Horseman is about how history bleeds into folklore, and how that folklore becomes an unforgettable legend. The unnamed German soldier, decapitated by a cannonball, lost his name to history. But thanks to Washington Irving, his ghost continues to ride through the American imagination, a permanent and terrifying part of our culture, forever searching for the head he lost so long ago. And the village of Sleepy Hollow, which officially changed its name in 1996 to embrace its literary fame, still welcomes thousands of visitors every year, all hoping to catch a glimpse of the phantom rider whose origins are not in fiction, but in fact.